Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar tonight. We're glad you can join us to hear an update on the Cucamonga Canyon Management Plan. My name is Marisa Campos-Trouts. I'm on the community outreach team with SBCOG. We'll be getting started in just a moment. And before we begin our presentation tonight, I'd like to share some information to help everyone get acquainted with our Zoom webinar. A note for everyone joining us this evening, this meeting is being recorded. All participants are muted and cameras will be off for the duration of the presentation. This evening's webinar will include a PowerPoint, followed by an opportunity for Q&A after the presentation. And to review any of the materials covered in tonight's presentation, please visit gosbcta.com/Cucamonga Canyon. We will be posting the recording of tonight's webinar as well as the PowerPoint slides before the end of the week. Finally, if you do have any questions or would like more information following tonight's webinar, please contact us by emailing info@gosbcta.com. Or you can give us a call at 877-55-SBCTA, and those calls are answered by our outreach team. I do want to quickly go over how to submit a question if you would like our panelists to answer during tonight's meeting. We ask that you please direct all questions using the Q&A box in Zoom, and that's highlighted on your screen here. It looks like 2 chat bubbles. Our team will reserve the chat feature in Zoom to drop in helpful links during the presentation. And also we may reach out to you directly to get clarification or get some more information from you to help answer your question. So again, we ask that you do enter your questions this evening into the Q&A box. That's where we'll be monitoring for your questions. Similarly, if you are joining us over the phone tonight or using the call-in option, we welcome you to email in your questions as well at info@gosbcta.com. One more reminder before we get started with our presentation. If you're interested in viewing a copy of the management plan that we'll be discussing during tonight's webinar, you can visit gosbcta.com/Cucamonga Canyon. We'll also be uploading a recording from tonight's presentation as well as the PowerPoint slides before the end of the week. With that, I want to thank everybody again for joining us. Tonight, again, we will be providing an update on the Cucamonga Canyon Management Plan. We will stick around after the presentation to answer your questions. The information presented tonight will be delivered by our project partners, including panelists representing the San Bernardino Council of Governments, or SBCOG, the City of Rancho Cucamonga, the Rancho Cucamonga Fire District, and the US Forest Service. This is an informational meeting to educate you about the Cucamonga Canyon Management Plan. We believe all positions, positive or negative, should have a voice in the process. However, we do expect that this is done in a respectful manner. We reserve the right to monitor, filter, and remove any content or participants that our team deems inappropriate. At this time, I would like to welcome Monique Reza Arellano of SBCOG to begin our presentation. Monique.
Hi, good evening. My name is Monique Arellano, and I'm with the San Bernardino Council of Governments, or SBCOG. We are a regional agency to which all of the cities in San Bernardino and the 5 county supervisors are members. We function as a collaborator and a convener for projects that are of regional significance and that potentially require the coordination and cooperation of multiple government agencies. So we entered this project in 2015 to help coordinate the efforts between the city, the fire district, the US Forest Service, and stakeholders like Cucamonga Valley Water District and the county flood control. And then as far as background for this particular project, just a little bit of history. You might remember that back in 2014, the Obama administration moved to designate the San Gabriel Mountains a national monument, which had the potential to impact the county's residents in a negative way. So San Bernardino County petitioned and advocated to have San Bernardino removed from that designation. This request was granted, but with the provision that we work with the U.S. Forest Service to create forest management plans for the areas in San Bernardino, and Cucamonga Canyon was one of them. So for the purpose of the plan is to allow for local control of the recreation and residential areas lying either within or adjacent to the U.S. Forest Service lands. And this includes access to the federal lands as well as management of the federal lands. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael Parmer from the city of Rancho Cucamonga to expand on a few items.
So thank you, Monique, and good evening, everyone. As mentioned, the development of that management plan for Cucamonga Canyon is important for several reasons. First, its development was the result of a comprehensive multi-agency collaboration that brought federal, county, city, special districts, and grassroots organizations together. This interagency cooperation is necessary as it ensures consistency in management and enforcement. In addition to the partner agencies and organizations on this presentation panel, and are also part of the federal, county, and city agencies, it also included the County of San Bernardino, the Cucamonga Valley Water District, and the Cucamonga Foothills Preservation Alliance. The plan's contents reflect the common goals and set up a blueprint for action for management that's adaptive, flexible, and strategic. This plan basically provides a framework for informed decision-making while guiding resource management practices, uses, and projects. Most importantly, it's prescriptive. It is not prescriptive, it's not rigid, and it's not one-dimensional. This is flexible and can be amended and updated for management direction based on new knowledge and information, allowing management decisions to consider responses based on uncertainty or unknown future events and conditions. Finally, this plan provides a continued pathway for local control of the recreation and residential areas, like Monique mentioned, lying either within or adjacent to the U.S. Forest Service lands. The goals of this plan are fourfold, and I've already mentioned the first two. In addition to providing that strategic framework for the canyon and surrounding area, the other goals include maintaining, protecting, and enhancing the area's natural and cultural resources, as well as improving public health and safety. Flip it. So the plan provides management direction on the desired conditions, standards, guidelines, approaches, indicators, and thresholds for Cucamonga Canyon. That's the basic tenets and components of this plan. It also contains an evaluation of 4 options for access to U.S. Forest Service lands through neighboring city and county jurisdictions. Currently, there's no safe or legal way for visitors to access that canyon. And of the 4 options that were identified, option 3 via the Morgan Ranch Trailhead is the most viable. It provides the least impact to residents. It provides a direct route of travel to public federal lands and property, and funding have already been secured. I'm now going to pass that presentation over to my colleague, Chief McClyman, who's going to speak on public safety and community risk reduction efforts.
Hi, everyone. Mike McClyman, Fire Chief, Rancho Cucamonga Fire District. First of all, thank you for having us. We love getting out in front of our community and our citizens and just speaking to things and allowing you to have a voice and for you to express to us your feelings on it. But so there's some things that I wanted to cover just with respect to public safety and really why the fire district even purchased the Morgan Ranch property to begin with. So just so I'm sure you all are aware, the fire district nor the city has any authority to close Cucamonga Canyon. That is strictly the Forest Service jurisdiction. We have a same thing, and it's mirrored in Etiwanda Canyon. So over to the east within the fire district boundaries, Etiwanda Canyon, we're able to close the access to the canyon, but the canyon itself is actually managed and ran by the Forest Service. So what we wanted to do when the Morgan Ranch property became available, we were notified of that a few years ago. And when we saw that as an opportunity because we look at purchasing that property to really give local control to the access to that land, because we do know that there is a long history of the citizens, let's just say, or folks outside of the area that like to have access to Sapphire Falls and places like that. So what we want to do is we want to be able to to control that access and really regulate who goes in and out. But more importantly, and the primary reason was we could use that piece of property should there be another wildfire incident. So personally, the chief officers that are on this call, including myself, were not only on the Grand Prix fire, which took place in 2003, but prior to that, there was actually a fire a few months earlier that was in that exact area just north of us, and the fire went topographically directly up the canyon and burned to the north. And I can tell you, by putting a snap water tank at the top of that, will allow helicopters to come and use their buckets to refill there. We could stage water tenders there and actually just give quicker access to being able to offensively attack the fire. So there are some goals that we have from a public safety perspective that do include firefighting tactics that we would like to use. Additionally, on red flag warnings and so forth, we have the ability to close the access to the canyon, just like we do in North Etiwanda. Our Deputy Fire Chief of Operations, Augie Beretta, works with the county. He and our fire marshal, whenever we get red flag warnings or we get threats of flooding, we close access to Etiwanda Canyon. What that does, it gives the ability for our local police department to actually enforce access into that. So should anybody try to access that area, they'll be in violation of the ordinance, and we can enforce that. We don't have that ability to do it now because people are still accessing the canyon because they have the ability to do that. But should we be able to have control over that, that would be our goal. And then finally, with the Almond Street connection, we understand that there is some concern with respect to Almond. I would tell you that Almond for us is our best access and most, if we're able to continue that extension and make it go all the way through. I can tell you, going back to 03 with the Grand Prix fires, what would happen is we'd have to come across and drop down Carnelia and go to Hillside, go across Hillside, back up to Sapphire, and then all the way to the top. And there is a delay, and every minute does matter. When Almond is punched through, we will have the ability to go directly across Almond, all across the front country, over into Gooseneck, which we feel like is something that we would really value and need to do for just public safety resources. Next slide. So with respect to community risk reduction, for us, community risk reduction has to do with getting out front of this and assessing the needs and being able to proactively get ahead of these things to do preventative measures before the emergency actually happens. So a couple things. One, with respect to monitoring, by now being the property owners, we fully intend to put cameras around that area when that trailhead is actually opened and when that does happen. As of now, we don't have a date for that. There's a lot of things that still have to happen. There's still private property that is just north of us with the King property or the King family. That's still being discussed. So there is no immediate plans. We're still quite a ways out, but we are progressing forward. One of the things we do plan to do, though, our Deputy Chief Ty Harris has been very proactive in this, looking to provide more security in the area. So now that we own it, we do want to put some opportunity. Well, there are opportunities for us to put some poles up so we can put some cameras, have some live feeds, and for us to be able to monitor that, and also have our PD monitor that as well, and the CFPA group, which is local and a volunteer group that we appreciate very much all their efforts, and give them access to those cameras so they can see what's happening. We will also do some enhanced public education, notify the community of things going on. And then again, and just additional warnings up in the area and additional signage of some of the risks associated with accessing the canyon. And one of the things that could happen should they go there and be in need for emergency services. So with that, I said there's some questions which we'll get to at the end, but I'd like to pass it off to Joe Rechsteiner with the U.S. Forest Service.
Hey, good evening, everybody. So my name's Joe Rechsteiner. I'm the district ranger I'm stationed in Lytle Creek, but it's for the Front Country Ranger District. I also have my recreation staff officer. He's on as well. He is Travis Mason, so he may come in and help me out where I need some help in talking about this. But so public access, yeah, as was stated already, there currently is no adequate public access. And that's one of the problems with the Forest Service, especially here in Southern California. You get people building right up next to the foothills, and that blocks off access. So that's really what's happened here is there is no access. And these are public lands, so they're everybody's. And so the public, they love it just as much as you all do. And that creates challenges. We call it we refer to it as the wildland urban interface. And, whether it's fires or floods or recreation visitors, wildlife, it creates challenges for people living next to it. And so anyways, like's been said, we've been working with our partners over the last several years, developing this plan to provide safe public access, because there's a lot of recreation opportunities up there, and we'd like to develop more. I would like to mention, one of our other partners, the Cucamonga Foothills Preservation Alliance. They're really our boots on the ground out there, just because of our limited resources. So they're picking up trash, they're making public contacts, they're removing graffiti. So tremendous shout out to them. And, we're always looking for volunteers, for anybody that wants to get, more involved. So public access is very important for public lands. Recreation opportunities. You've got some trails up there, you've got some roads up there, and people like to go use it. You can, heck, if I wanted to, I could go walk across the side of the hill right now on those public lands. So providing that access for recreation opportunities, that's really the point of this plan here. And we want to provide safe access. So we've been working with the partners for the last several years. As was mentioned, we came up with several alternatives, and the alternative that was selected was the most viable. Also like to talk a little bit about resource protection. So, the Forest Service, we do manage for multiple resources. So you got wildlife habitat out there. Recreation is a resource. There's special use permits, power lines, stuff like that. So we're managing it for all sorts of different things. And, I know it was mentioned too, water quality. We do manage, in fact, most of the water comes off of public lands, off the Forest Service. And so we've got several projects that we're working on that's going to improve, the resiliency of the forest and provide good, water downstream. So any future development on Forest Service lands would require us to go through, and so the trailhead and the access, that's on non-Forest Service lands. But if we were going to create any more trails or any other recreation facilities, we'd have to go through a public involvement process and environmental analysis. Anyways, there's probably going to be more to come on that, because I know access to Sapphire Falls is one of the challenges, which back in 2013, for those who don't know, that's when we did our first closure of the area. And that was really for safety, and give us the opportunity to develop a plan and provide safe access. Let's see. And I'll just see if Travis, do you have anything to add to what I've said there?
No, thank you, Joe. No, I'm all good.
Okay. That's the end of my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joe. And thank you to all of our panelists for covering this information for us tonight. Before we dive into our Q&A, just a reminder for anyone that joined us a little bit late, if you are interested in reviewing any of the information discussed tonight, including a copy of the management plan, please visit our website, gosbcta.com/Cucamonga Canyon. We will also be posting a recording of tonight's presentation as well as the PowerPoint slides up on that website before the end of the week. At this time, we will be launching our Q&A. I see a few questions already into the Q&A box. Thank you so much. A reminder, we want to reserve the chat feature for our team to reach out and maybe ask you additional questions or get information to help answer your question. We may also be dropping in some helpful links into the chat that you may find useful for follow-up after the meeting. I want to put this slide back up for anybody looking for the Q&A box. It's in your Zoom toolbar. It looks like 2 conversation bubbles. So as we get through Q&A, or if something else comes to mind, please feel free to drop those there, and then we will direct those questions to our panelists. If you do have any questions after tonight's meeting or want some additional information, you can always email our team at info@gosbcta.com. We'd be happy to make sure that we direct your question to the appropriate team member to be sure to get you an answer. I'm going to put this slide up for a bit while we launch into Q&A. And the first question I see is for Mike Palmer. Mike, we're looking for information. When did the city approve the Almond Street extension? Is there a timeline for construction of that extension? Thank you.
I can start to answer this, and then I might have to follow back up. To the best of my knowledge, this is a strategy that we've been exploring for quite some time, particularly in regards to facilitating emergency services. As Chief McClyman already talked about, this is not something that is imminent or has been formally adopted by council action as of yet.
Yeah, and I'd like to follow up and just reiterate that in case there's any confusion. There is no plan as of today, nor even in the foreseeable future in which Almond extension is going to be completed. It's more of a goal with respect to public safety access as a whole. So as a fire district, it would definitely be something that we would talk to the community about. We'll do something similar, or even more so, actually do it probably at the city council level, where we would get public input from the citizens at the city council meeting, where we would have some type of discussion regarding that. So please don't take that as all of a sudden there's going to be construction folks up there punching the street through. That's not happening. I think realistically for us, for access with respect to public safety and fire access, that would be a goal that we would have with Almond Street.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Mike. Next question, and maybe this is related to the other, would Almond Street be open at all times or only during an emergency? Thanks for that question.
So again, great question. Thank you for that. I think it was probably something that we would discuss at that time. So I noticed there's a lot of Almond Street questions as I'm looking through the chat. And let me just say, I'll reiterate it, there is no plan as it sits today in which Almond Street is going to be constructed to go through. There is no plan. It's really to get out ahead of it and just kind of let all of you know the goal in the future, what that would be with respect to public safety and emergency vehicles being able to access from Carnelian to Sapphire. Now, how that ends up being is probably going to have a lot of public input. I'm assuming the city council very much I know the city council very much values its citizens' input when it comes to something like that. So we wouldn't do anything like that without having these discussions first.
Thank you, Chief. Next question. Joe mentioned limited resources to perform cleanup, etc. When crowds come to use the forest, how will limited resources become adequate to take care of cleanup, patrolling, parking in the community, etc.? Is there a plan to address those?
So I'll start off there. So like I mentioned, we rely heavily on the Cucamonga Friends, the Cucamonga Foothills Preservation Alliance, other volunteers as well. That's how we get our cleanup done. And I'll just speak specifically for the Forest Service because it's on Forest Service lands, where the parking, that would be on non-Forest Service lands. But we've got some recreation technicians, we've got fire folks, and they're engaged as well. But it's really the volunteers that we rely on to do a lot of that pickup. And again, giving a shout out to the Cucamonga Foothills Preservation Alliance. I've been working with them for 5 years now, and I know they've been around longer than that. And we couldn't do it without them. They're the eyes and ears out there. When people go back up in there, they're keeping them, like they'll go up there with fireworks. They're like, hey, you can't take your fireworks up here. If they get ignorant with them, they'll reach out to the Rancho Cucamonga PD to get their assistance. Of course, we got the fire folks out there too, Rancho Cucamonga Fire. They've been heavily involved with this, and of course down at the trailhead area as well as the access. But Yeah, our plan is, at least on the Forest Service, is to rely on partners. And we've got a lot of partners across the forest. That's how we get our trail maintenance done. That's how we get our business done. And so that's what we would do there on the forest. And I don't know if anybody wants to talk about the parking area in that, but I know we've had discussions about that as well.
Yeah, so I can address the parking with respect to the Morgan Ranch. If I'm sure you're all aware, the access to that area and where the property is located, really, first thing that we did was we mitigated most of the hazards. So we got rid of the structure that was there. We filled the pool up, graded, well, not necessarily graded, but we just skimmed the top and just kind of removed a lot of the debris and then cleaned it up. The goal is to keep it that way and keep it intact. We do not see a safe route of entry or exit to have anybody park up top. So we've already looked at that as not a viable opportunity. That would not be the case going forward. Our Deputy Chief of Administration, Ty Harris, is the project manager, and he's already done these assessments. And right off the bat, we don't see that as a viable option. The only thing we would put up there would probably be, and this is again, we don't know for sure because we're still a long ways out from any of this taking place. But there's different things being talked about, maybe, having a trail host or, some restrooms, definitely some garbage cans and things like that, and utilizing our volunteers to help with that. But we will not have anybody parking up in that area. There's just no way to do it. Going forward, where they're going to park, we have not made a decision on that because, like we said, there's still a large piece of private land in which there's no transaction that's taken place from there. So we're essentially at a standstill. Where we sit today is we've been able to purchase the Morgan Ranch property. We wanted to notify all of our citizens because you've seen things taking place, and then there's been some discussions on social media. So really what we wanted to do was just kind of provide the facts as they sit today. And the only thing happening so far today is the district has purchased the land. We could utilize it for potential future public safety uses in the immediate future. And any plans to do anything with respect to parking and going forward, we actually don't know yet because we don't know what the outcome of the piece of land that we need from the King family would be in order to even create that trail. So that's where we sit. So I couldn't give you a definitive answer on the parking because we really don't have one as of yet.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Joe. The next question I see, what is the exact access route that was chosen? Are there any other routes that will be allowed?
Hi, Diana. That's Mike. Good to have you on here. So the access route, I think you heard Mike Farmer say option 3 was probably the one that we preferred. But again, with option 3, there is still the outstanding issue, like I said, with the King family and that private property. So that's still being discussed, and I'm not sure how close we are to having that remedied. But as of right now, it's still ongoing discussions. So that would be the preferred route, would be right above the Morgan Ranch property that would kind of stretch to the west and to the northwest, essentially, and just go up to the access road there.
Another comment that I'll just read through for the group. Almond going through to Carnelian is a major problem for local residents, and there's interest in public meetings prior to that moving forward, or first shovel, as it
Yeah,
states.
and I was just going to clarify too that, I know there's a lot of interest generated around Almond Street and whatnot, and I really feel that that's a completely separate issue from the Cucamonga Canyon Management Plan. So we will definitely, if people have other questions regarding Almond Street, what the tentative thought process was behind that, or like some clarification, please, feel free to contact the city offline and be more than happy to have those discussions. I don't want to get down too much down a rabbit hole. I really like to answer other people's questions on the actual plan and access to the canyons.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next question up in the chat, in the Q&A box. Prior to the closure in 2013, there were several impacts that were identified in the management report. Specifically, there was litter and human waste left behind, visitors trespassed onto private property along the adjacent city streets, visitors parked in driveways and along residential streets, vandalism to water district structures and other private property. How will the plan address this? The second part of this question is what will be the costs associated with maintaining a trailhead and associated amenities, including trash collection, maintenance, restoration of damaged natural areas. So two-parter. I'll pose that to the group.
I can start some of that conversation. So some of the guidance and the framework that's entailed in the management plan talks about leveraging and continuing to leverage the existing partnerships that we already have with community groups that are going out there today. I know we mentioned one of them, but it's not the only partner that we've worked with in order to help continue to keep those areas clean. The trailhead is, I think, somewhat separate from into the canyon area itself. The canyon, the trailhead and the location of the trailhead would be maintained by city because it's on city property. And then moving forward, we'd be continuing to work with our community partners, volunteer organizations, Boy Scouts. There's a whole host of number of volunteer groups that have already expressed interest, and the fire district probably speak a little bit more to what those partners are, but they've done a great job cultivating those relationships and have utilized them on multiple occasions.
Yeah, I would agree with Mike, and I would just say again, our CFPA group is very proactive in the area. Whatever we can do to continue to provide those resources and to be their partner, I think we value that relationship very much. So for us, it's how do we continue to cultivate that relationship and give them the resources they would need to continue to operate the way they do and even enhance that operation. So that's how we look at that. With respect to the costs associated with maintaining the trailhead, we haven't gotten that far yet because we haven't, we're still, like I said, trying to determine specifically what we're going to do with it. As of now, the fire district owns the property, like I said, and our vision for it in the immediate is to use it should there be a fire up in the urban interface right there in the immediate foothills. Use it for a staging area, or like I said, even a snap water tank. So going forward, beyond that, I would say that we will do an assessment. And once we do that assessment, we'll come back to the group and we'll obviously talk to the community again about it. So you are fully aware of what the plans are and how we plan to address that.
Thank you for that question. Next question. Bear with me while I scroll here. What strategies did the city and county have for addressing parking, even if Morgan Ranch does become a trailhead?
So I could tell you right off the bat, like we said, we are not going to allow parking on the Morgan Ranch property. It's not feasible. Secondary to that, that'll be something that I'm sure our police department is going to be heavily involved in, along with our city manager's office and Mike Farmer in the city manager's office with respect to the number of people and access. I would say that the city manager, under the guidance or under the direction of the city council, very much values the input of the citizens up in that community with respect to the parking on the streets. As we know today, it's permit parking, and you all are aware of that. But going forward, what does that look like? One of the things I can tell you that we will do and that we already do in Etiwana Canyon is you're able to, it's limited based upon the availability. And we can close it at any time, in which we do actually quite often. So once the access is there, which is sometime in the future, we're not sure when, then we'll have the ability to monitor that and then truly limit the spaces. But we don't have a definitive number. I would say the hundreds of people, we understand that that's been taking place over the years and years past. People just through social media have accessed it. We would not be comfortable with anywhere near that So how we go about limiting that would probably be addressed at the city manager's office, as well as with our police department partners.
Thank you, Chief. Next question here. The management plan indicates that 100 to 200 people visited the falls and exceeded 400 people on peak days. How will you address the influx of foot and car traffic in the area?
Yeah, I think the theme is we get it. The theme was initially Almond Street, which we feel we addressed. The next theme is how we're going to address the number of people. There are a lot of ways we could do that with public input, and again with the police department. One of the things to remember is this is now in the city proper when it comes to the parking aspect of it, and because it then falls under the jurisdiction of the Rancho Cucamonga Police Department. When it happens in the city proper, it's the Rancho Cucamonga Police Department. Once it falls outside of those boundaries and it's either in the county or state area, well, then it's not necessarily under the jurisdiction of our local police department. It then falls to the county sheriffs, and those deputies can come from anywhere. They can come from Fontana, they can come from San Antonio Heights, or even Chino Hills. So again, what we want to do is have as much local control as possible. And by getting the input of the community, how the community foresees the ways in which you can mitigate those issues with respect to parking and access, we're very much open to. There is nothing in place right now that says this is what we're going to do. We want all of you to know this is a starting point. Actually, this meeting is a starting point for what we're doing. And I think your input is going to be very valuable, especially as we go forward.
And I just wanted to clarify too, and I'm sure the U.S. Forest Service could probably provide a little bit more context to that, is some of those figures too. People don't just access that area from Skyline or some of the surrounding areas. They can come from multiple directions. So sometimes those numbers get a little skewed. I'm not downplaying the impact to the area. But I do just want to highlight that that's not the only place that people come in, because that entire area is open for public recreation in a whole host of ways.
Yeah, just to echo what Mike was saying there. Yeah, there's other, like if somebody has their private residence, that backs up to the Forest Service land, they can walk right out their back and go up there and utilize it. If somebody was, energetic enough, they could hike from Lytle Creek or, Burl Canyon, there's all sorts of different ways that they could get in there. Not that they would hike all the way in there to Sapphire Falls, though. I think the limiting factor for Sapphire Falls is going to be the parking, because honestly, I don't know how many people are going to, hike, too far to get up in there. So they're going to be looking for quick access. But yeah, you still have the local residents that certainly they could go out their backyard, go up there. People could hike in from other areas. But I think the real limiting factor is going to be the amount of parking that's available.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Next question. What kind of public notice is provided for each stage of this project? Do we want to touch on that a little bit?
I guess before I can provide some context to that, I need to have a little bit more information about what they're referring to and what is she looking at just for the trailhead, or is there other items that she's looking for?
Okay. Thank you for that question, Rochelle. We'll reach out in the chat to get a little bit more detail.
So Marisa, I can address that a little bit from the Forest Service side. So any development that's going to be on U.S. Forest Service land, we have to go through the public involvement process and do an environmental analysis and make a decision. If we're proposing any new trails up in that area, that would have to go through that public involvement process and environmental analysis.
Thank you, Joe. And I believe that answers the next question I see here in the chat. A user has commented local residents should have been involved several years ago, and then just communicating that it was difficult to get information about the meeting tonight or be invited. So I know that it is a public meeting, and thank you for the information about the Forest Service and what that process is like, Joe. Appreciate that. And the next question I see here in the Q&A box. We are very concerned about potential fire in our area. Right now, insurance companies are canceling insurance because of a fire-prone area. With the opening of the canyon, this will increase fire risk, and what is planned for this? I suspect insurance companies may pull out. So, question about the fire risk in the area. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, Mr. Childers or Chelders. Sorry for the pronunciation. So one, thank you for the question, because absolutely, your concern about the fire risk is very much our concern about the fire risk. So again, being here in 2003, being a firefighter in the city in 2003, I vividly remember the Grand Prix fire. I feel like our chief officers know exactly how that's going to burn should it burn again. Now, remember, the Grand Prix fire was a wind-driven fire. Being a wind-driven fire, when you have the winds coming out of the northeast and it blew across the front country, essentially what it does is it sideswipes the front of the mountains and then it burns up topographically upslope into the canyons. The threat to that, to the area and to the houses are an imminent and major threat. And being a wind-driven fire, one of the things that's unique about that is wind events are predictable. So because wind events are predictable, what we would do in Cucamonga Canyon is no different than what we already do in Etiwanda Canyon. So very often when we get from the National Weather Service reports that come in of high wind warnings, when we get those extreme winds reported, we'll automatically contact our partners at the county and we will close Etiwanda Canyon. We talk to our local police department, and our local police department is aware and they actually patrol it. So these are things that we are very proactive upon. So with respect to the fire threat and it burning towards the houses, that is absolutely our concern, and we will not allow any access up there. That actually will be done days in advance, and we've closed it up for upwards of 2 weeks, simply because of that. We'll end up having sometimes, as we did in the spring, we'll have high winds followed by rain. And, so you'll see some areas that have high winds, they get some fires, and the next thing you know, there's flood threats. So we can close it for all of those things. And we would do that without hesitation with respect to that. Not only is it winds that we're concerned about, but obviously the heat index. So when we look at fuel moistures, we analyze those regularly, especially with our Forest Service partners, but it's something that we consider ourselves wildland firefighters because we're in Southern California and all firefighters are wildland firefighters. So we analyze the fuel moistures, the critical fire weather, the temperatures, and with all of those things, if they're in alignment in coordination, actually it ends up happening across essentially the front country in the San Bernardino Forest or even in the Angeles Forest, we'll just close all of those. And that's just from a firefighting perspective to be preventative on that front. So we want you to know we'll continue to do that. We'll be notifying the public should and when that happens. And we'll just be more stern with it because we do know that there's a possibility of having higher traffic.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for that question. Another question for Mr. Childers. Please comment on the wildlife that will be impacted on the opening of the canyon. The wildlife has grown over the last 10 years. Opening more people will put wildlife at risk. Will all impact studies be done prior to opening? I may direct that one to Joe or.
Yeah, so, the reason that we have the closure order in place is because of no safe access and the dangers that were happening. There are people getting injured. Public lands typically aren't closed down to the public unless we have a reason to do that. So, there's not going to be any studies planned for reopening the canyon, that small piece. Of course, there's a lot of other areas that are accessible right now as well. But like I said, if we're going to be doing any further development up there, trails development, anything like that, we're going to have to go through an environmental analysis process. And that would, analyze the impacts to the wildlife in the area. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Chief McClyman was saying too. When we're in high fire danger, the U.S. Forest Service, we're working with our partners, the county, the city, the state, and we'll implement fire restrictions. We also do closures during high fire danger because we don't want, not only, we don't want people starting a fire back there, but we don't want people to get caught back in the woods if there's a fire started back there. So anyways, just wanted to comment on what Chief McCline was talking about and fire danger.
Thank you. Next question from Diana Lee. Hi, Diana. How long will the canyon be allowed to be closed? Will U.S. Forest Service, USDA Washington support future closures?
So again, these are public lands, and so they're, whether you live in New York or California, they're public lands. Our great grandchildren will be using these lands one day. So to answer the question, it's not going to be a forever closure. We've been able to get closures in place while we're making improvements to the, creating the plan. So when we were making progress on the plan, now we're making progress on the trailhead, we're making progress on the access. So we're able to continue those closures, but no, they're not, the closures aren't going to go on forever, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I see another question. Prior to opening of the canyon, there must be environmental, traffic, water, fire studies done. Will these be done? And who will pay? I think we've addressed that a little bit. Anything else that we want to add to that end?
No, the other thing I can add to that is, there's a NEPA and CEQA requirement as part of the development of the trailhead itself. That's limited to the area where the trailhead is and some of the surrounding areas. And so those will be conducted appropriately. We're not quite ready to move forward yet. We have a proposal on the table. Right now, we're working through securing all the bureaucratic paperwork that we need to do in order to get the money from our federal earmark. That's going to be paying for the environmental assessment.
Thank you, Mike. Another question here. Are there any development plans for the meadow north of the unpaved west end of Almond Avenue? It has been mentioned that this area was Rancho Cucamonga property and was subject to housing development. Is this true?
I'm not aware of any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not either. And we can verify and circle back if need be.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Lisa. We'll reach out to get your contact information so we can follow up with you offline after this meeting. The next question, in response to the comment that there are other access points to the trail and the falls, if there are those other access points, why not expand on those trailheads?
I would just say we don't have jurisdiction over those trailheads. We have no ability to dictate for us specifically to Rancho Cucamonga and Cucamonga Canyon, and also with the management plan itself. The management plan itself actually addressed Cucamonga Canyon access from Rancho Cucamonga.
Thank you. The next question. Adjacent homeowners oppose bringing thousands of daily vehicles through our neighborhoods. Evacuation is impossible, adding public recreation traffic. Social media will bring overcapacity crowds, raising taxes for administration, law enforcement, and fire protection. What is planned to mitigate overcapacity? I think we've talked a little bit about that, but anything else we want to add?
No, I appreciate the question, Mr. Cisneros. I mean, obviously, could it bring it? Yes, we have addressed this question similarly earlier. I think, again, our objective is to just get the local control over it and try to regulate if and when or I would just say not if, but when the canyon is opened by the Forest Service, as you heard Joe Rechsteiner talk about. That is public access to that land is the mission of the Forest Service. So what they've done, though, has been great partners with us by allowing it to be closed this long. So again, it's just our ability to control the access and provide a legal and safe route. Now, how we go about doing that, eventually we're going to bring in our citizens and get the input and look at probably the best feasibility the best way to do it and what's most feasible going forward. So as of now, we don't have an answer because we don't know what that's going to be. There's just other issues that are still at stake. We just wanted to kind of do this as a jump off with this meeting and just kind of let everybody know where it stands today. And simply where it stands, like I said earlier, is nothing more than the fire district purchasing the Morgan Ranch property and whining right now to utilize it for public safety uses should there be any fires or emergencies in the near future.
Thank you, Chief. The next question, as the current planning discussion stands, what future or expectations assume or include commercial interests located within Morgan Creek parcel? I'm thinking of either kiosks or pop-ups with human resources or vending machines. Any information to share to that end?
Yeah, none of those have been identified as a desire or included in any design plan. We are really looking at much more of a traditional trailhead, signage, information that leads you into the canyon, rules, regulations, staging area. That's about it. Minor
Thank you.
improvements.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Another question, don't we need a trail built to access the falls? We can access to Inspiration Point, but not safely down and in.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So yeah, that's on Forest Service land. And so what we would need to do is our environmental assessment of it, on the impacts of it, look at alternatives and do that community engagement. But yeah, that is part of the plan, is to develop access down to Sapphire Falls. Yeah, where it'll go, we'll see. But yeah, like I said, we've got to go through our analysis process and see, because the other thing, we want to build a safe and sustainable trail. And as you all know, if you've been up in that canyon, it's pretty steep in a lot of areas. But yes, that's the plan. We need to go through our analysis process and decision making to develop any trails that access Sapphire Falls.
Thank you, Joe. The last question I see in our Q&A right now, prior to the closure of the canyon, firearm use was a continued problem. Are there any plans in place to cover firearm use in the canyon?
So maybe I'll start off there. Not sure if there's any local ordinances, but people are not allowed to shoot anywhere they want on the forest. We have certain areas that are designated for shooting. Of course, not everybody follows the rules, and when they get up into the hills, they could certainly bring their guns and go shooting, but it's not allowed to just go shooting anywhere, with the exception if it's in a hunting area and they're out there hunting during hunting season, then they can absolutely bring their guns. Not sure if there's any county or city input on that one, but yeah, from the Forest Service, they're not allowed to go shoot wherever they want. And it's an enforcement thing. We'd have to rely on our partners, as well as, especially the Rancho Cucamonga PD. And when we have our CFPA friends out there, they're keeping an eye on everything going on out there. And that's the first people they're calling is the local PD. But yeah, hope that addresses the question.
Thank you, Joe. Another question is referring back, so some 25 years ago, several people lost their lives at Sapphire Falls. Will there be any safety measures put in place to prevent this?
So thank you for that question, Lisa. I think being one of the persons, and I know our deputy chiefs who are on this, we're actually on a couple of those calls ourselves. Those are very traumatic, obviously, for the families that were involved, but even for the first responders. I would say anything that we can do to mitigate that risk, we're going to be and wanting to be a part of doing. And yet at the same time, as of right now, there really is no safe access to those areas. So if people are accessing them, they're already doing it without any legal route to do it, or so it'd be something that obviously we wouldn't be able to do now. Going forward, we don't know, because we don't even know if there will be access to the falls, because as Joe said, I mean, in order to get to them, it's very difficult as it sits today. And I think from a risk reduction perspective, the only thing really we can do that's reasonable would be, again, reminding people how dangerous they are and the risk that they're taking by even accessing them to begin with. And that kind of goes with most things, unfortunately, in our business. You know, there's a lot of risk involved with a lot of things people do. And on the response side of it, it's very traumatic when you see those outcomes. So thanks for that. I think it's something that we would probably brainstorm going forward when that time does come.
Well, and just to piggyback on what Chief McClymon's talking about, so yeah, there was, you know, and people, they can go up on the forest and, you know, we have fatalities from time to time. But what the whole intent with this plan was is develop safe and legal access. And that includes access down to Sapphire Falls. So if you recall back in the day, you know, people are just scrambling up and down the hills, which, I mean, you can do that, it's public lands. But that's why we closed it down, was because of that danger. And so developing that safe and legal access, which will include, you know, access down to Sapphire Falls.
Thank you, Joe. Another question here. Is there any suggestions as to when any of this will be completed? Speakers say not soon, but what does that mean? Months, years? It has been almost 10 years since the closure.
So I can speak in terms of the trailhead itself. The trailhead is probably about 2 years out from being realized. We are currently in the very initial stages. We have an environmental assessment that we need to do. That'll likely take about, well, that'll take months, 4 to 6 months at a minimum. And then we've got design. And then once the design is approved, then we'll move forward to construction. And then that assessment also needs to be approved on the NEPA side by HUD, since HUD is a fiscal agent that's providing the federal earmark dollars.
Thank you, Mike. We have a few more minutes. Are there any other questions before we reach the top of the hour? We did get some questions from folks that registered for the meeting. I'll pose a couple of those before we wrap up here at 7. Are there plans for bathrooms, a paved lot, trash cans to be provided for Sapphire Falls at the hiking area? And then is there any plan to add these for Etiwanda? Kind of a tangent question there.
Again, I think as of right now, there's nothing in concrete. There are no set plans. I think, again, taking public input, having staff do an analysis and really looking at what the needs are going to be, we would probably go from there. This is probably, like I said, this is our first initial, you know, jump off meeting. And as we continue forward, we'll take some of those things in consideration and make sure that the immediate neighborhoods impacted are probably at the forefront of some of the decisions that we make, and our residents in the area. So it'd be something that we would consider.
Thank you. Thank you. If a parking district needs to be created, how do we ask for that?
I think I can start. Oh, sorry, Chief, go for it.
No, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, I think my understanding is if there's a parking district that is desired in a certain area that requires 75% of the, I believe 75% of the affected area residents who will need to essentially sign a petition, and we can take that to council for consideration. That's kind of a very truncated version of that, but it would start with having conversations with the city, garnering engaging interest, and then soliciting the affected area, identifying what that area would look like, and then looking at engaging those residents to see if they would approve something like that or not. And they would need to get about 75% or 2/3 of their neighbors who would sign in.
Thank you. Dennis asks that we read a comment from his comment from registration. I am trying to pull that up. I believe he just wanted to share again concern about negative impacts for homeowners of property in the area, overcapacity and traffic, which are some things that we've touched on this evening, crime, wildfire, needless fourth canyon access, concerns about insurance, inadequate fire evacuation, law enforcement, daily traffic through the neighborhoods. Excuse me, I cut that off there. Higher taxes for parking, permits, and water rates. So a host of concerns. Thank you for sharing those with us, Dennis. Any other points that we want to share on those concerns? I know we've touched on several.
I think just to address Mr. Cisneros, I think it's important. He needs to know from us that those are our concerns as well. So we don't take those haphazardly, and we don't brush those aside. We take those very serious, and we appreciate you putting them down and presenting them to us, because again, as we go forward and we develop the plan, we want to take that and make sure that we get a 360-degree view before any plan is put in place. And I think just one of the things that the city of Rancho Cucamonga values, and I know that that's required on us as a fire chief by the city council and my boss, the city manager, is to make sure that all those things are factored in. The citizens, the community's views are taken into consideration before we move forward with a plan such as this that has such a big impact. So thank you for that. We'll absolutely look at that as we go forward and try to include the community on that.
Thank you, Chief. We are just at the top of the hour here. I see one more question from Mr. Cisneros. Why put a parking lot to bring thousands through neighborhoods when it makes evacuation impossible? I think we've touched on that there are no plans for those things at the moment. Anything else that we want to add from our panelists there?
Thank you for reiterating that. Mr. Cisneros, as of today, there is no plan for putting a parking lot in place anywhere. We just, that's not part of where we are as we sit today. And should that come to be in the future, we're going to definitely take input on, like I said, on all of those concerns.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say thanks to everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, Mike. And thanks to all of our panelists as well. Thank you to all of the guests that have joined us this evening for our webinar. We appreciate the opportunity to engage with you, and we hope that you have found this webinar helpful. Thank you, Mr. Childers. I see the comment, if you cannot park, then you can't access the falls. Thank you so much. The team did touch on that. And so we are just at the start of engaging with where things stand today. We want to thank everybody for your thoughtful questions and engaging in this dialogue with us. The slide that has been up on the screen during Q&A includes how you can contact us following this meeting. If you have any additional questions or concerns, please email our team at info@gosbcta.com, and we'll be sure to direct your question to the appropriate team member and make sure that we can connect you with the information that you're looking for. You are also welcome to call our team 877-55-SBCTA, and that is members of our outreach team that answer those phone calls, and we'll make sure that you get directed to the right person. Just a couple of closing remarks before we wrap up and let you go for the evening. If you do want to review a copy of the management plan that was discussed during this evening's webinar, visit the website gosbcta.com/Cucamonga Canyon. Before the end of the week, we will also be posting a recording of tonight's meeting, as well as the PowerPoint presentation that was shared by our panelists. And we did get questions from folks. How can they get involved in the process going forward? Or how do they make sure to get updates about Cucamonga Canyon or the management plan in the future? So everyone that registered for tonight's meeting, we have your email address, and we'll be adding that to our communications database. And that will be shared with our project partners from the city, the fire district, as well as Forest Service. So by registering for tonight's meeting, that is how you can stay up to date. You can also send us an email if you have friends or neighbors that want to be included in future communications or receive emails about Cucamonga Canyon or updates about future meeting opportunities. Feel free to send in your information that way. Again, the email address is info@gosbcta.com. And just by virtue of joining us for this webinar tonight, you will be included in future announcements about any meetings or communications around Cucamonga Canyon. With that, I want to thank you all for joining us. That concludes our webinar for this evening. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.